Hey, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor and welcome to another painting demo. Today I want to share this painting that I actually have painted about 2 years ago. It is part of a video where I share how to paint water with watercolor. What happened was somebody wanted to collect this painting and for some reason I couldn't find it. So that means I probably threw it away. Looking back, there is something that I wasn't really happy about my previous attempt, so I decided to paint it again for the collector who wants this, and also made the adjustment that I wanted to do. So if you see my last version, keep watching to see what I've done differently this time. So this time I actually did a value study just to have a better preparation for the final color painting. So from the reference, you can see that there's actually no boat in this scenery. Again, this is from Bembridge Island. I visited the place about 2 years ago. I absolutely love it there. I was at the beach there and I took a photo of this scenery. I love the tranquility and how clear the shallow water was. And there was actually a boat nearby, it's just not in this particular shot. So I combined two shots and make it into the reference that I'm painting with. So here comes the first wash for the value study, which is the middle value. So I start with the background trees. I leave out the white for the mast on the boat. That is something that will really make the boat pops in front of the background. And I continue that shape down for the reflection of the background trees. And also start to give it a little bit of the value for the shallow water. The reason there is some light part in the water is because of the reflection of the sky, which is really bright. So you got this bright reflection of the sky and the darker reflection of the background. And when it comes to the shallow part of the water, we start to see the rock underneath, so it becomes a little bit darker again. So now I start to paint the dark value. And as you can see, I'm using my dark value a little bit more sparingly this time. Even though pine trees are typically darker because of their color, I want the pine tree to be more in the middle value realm in this case, just because I won't lose that freshness and the sense of lighting in my painting. And that is actually something I missed out in my previous attempt. I take things a little bit too literally. I see the background pine trees are mostly dark, so I paint them all dark. And it starts to lose its transparency and loses light. So now I start my drawing for the final painting. It's a pretty simple drawing, so I'm just going to speed it through. Block out the simple shape with a dull 4B pencil, and then I come back with my mechanical pencil to make a cleaner line drawing. And now what's important here is I actually use a little bit of masking fluid pen, especially for the mast on the boat, just so that I can make a clean wash without worrying about leaving out the white for such a small shape. So I pre-wet the sky before I start painting so I can have some soft white cloud in the sky. So because I pre-wet the sky already, we have to mix a little bit more intense color mixture for the sky. Otherwise, it's going to get washed out. So I leave out a little bit of the white. So we have some nice soft white cloud in the sky. And immediately I start to connect the shape for the trees in the background. They are all wet onto wet, so we have some very soft bloom in our wash. And that is fine because we are just painting the color of the light. So a little bit of soft edges are actually really nice, as long as your mixture is not too wet. You can still have a controlled soft shape. So continue to wash down. I skip around a little bit for the rooftop on the buildings in the back. I want to leave those as white. Continue to wash down. The boat is definitely a highlight, so I leave out the boat. And again, when you are doing a big wash like that, try to use a brush that's bigger so that it's easier for you to mix more mixtures and also get a big consistent wash. So I continue to wash down, and as I come down to the shore, I changed the color to something a little bit more greenish. So I added some turquoise and even a little bit of yellow to my mixtures. So we got a nice transition from blue to green. And now before the wash is completely dry, I quickly go back and started to paint some soft ripples with a little bit drier mixtures so you won't create cauliflower edges with that. And also before the wash is dry, I start to small soft shapes in the foreground and they will become the rocks under the shallow water because they are visible, just that they are softer because they're under the water. So it's fun trying to figure out a way to paint those things. And that's one of the reasons why the collector really liked this piece is because watercolor is such a natural medium to paint the transparency of water surface. Now onto the second wash, I start to paint the middle value of the painting. So we start with the background. And this time around, I deliberately mix my green towards a little bit more to the warmer side. Because of the sunlight, I want to have this warmth in the green tone. So I added a little bit of orange in my green mixtures just to make it look a little bit warmer. That being said, I still try to add a little bit of cooler tones here and there just to make it to have a better variety of greens. And also try to be careful, leave out the highlight of the rooftop of the background houses. And because I already applied masking fluid for the boat mast, I don't have to worry about it. I can just paint it over, and after I take it out, it will have a nice clean white for that shape. So for shape that's really small, I am not against using masking fluid. Of course, you can come back in and paint with white gouache. That will also work, but I feel like masking fluid always give you a cleaner result. Here you can see I connect the shape of the tree to the house, just so that it can have a better fluidity and also feels a little bit more coherent. I just changed the color a little bit. I mean, even though this is the second time that I paint this painting, when I paint this painting, it still brought me back to the fond memory of my visit to Bembridge Island with my family. It was during the early stage of the pandemic. Everybody's working from home, even the kids are doing school online at home. So everybody is getting a little bit of cabin fever. So it's nice that we were able to take a short trip. And the beach is actually very quiet. I remember during that morning it's just my family. So we had a really good time there. I clean my palette a little bit because I want some clean color for the blue sail on the boat. Adding the far distant background in. It's still somewhat of a middle value, but I make it just a little bit lighter and less saturated, a little bit more blue. And now it's time to paint the water surface. So I need to mix a middle value color for the reflection of the background trees. I need a lot of mixtures because I want this to be done in one go. And I decided to make the color a little bit cooler than the actual trees in the background just because I can have a little bit of the color differences between the water and the trees. And continue to wash down. I do need to slow down just a little bit because of the reflection of the boat. We see some white reflection because of the boat itself is white. So we need to paint a little bit of detail on that part. I switched to a smaller brush. And also while at it, I did some wet onto wet on the reflection, just so that we can have a little bit more depth for the reflection on the water surface. This part is always a little bit tricky because the lighting on the reflection is so complex, but we also want to keep it simple. So it's very important to think about how would I paint a certain things before I start to put in brushstrokes. It's very easy to overdo it. and the painting is going to look not as fresh and too busy. Adding a couple more ripples and reflection of the sky, just to make the water looking more alive and moving. And now we come back in and paint the dark side of the boat. And with that in, we start to see the structure of the boat, with a little bit of dark value for the occluded shadow and just a few details on the boat. And now I'm trying to paint the foreground rocks again and also the shallow water. So I re-wet the surface again because I want to keep most of the rock underneath the water surface soft. So after re-wet the surface again, any dark value I paint in there are going to be soft shapes, which again is what I wanted for the shallow water and the rock underneath it. Now, it's not possible for me to paint thousands of rocks underneath the water, so a little bit of visual language, some subtle contrast, light and the dark will do. It's hard to copy exactly what we see in the nature because it's so complex and filled with rich detail, and especially if you want to paint loose, that's not something that's viable for us. So how effective can we use visual language to convey what we see is very, very important. And it's always very easy to overdo these things because we might did a few and saw that it looks good and we want to repeat that all over the place. And eventually it'll lose its meaning. So be very careful and use all the details and the visual language sparingly. Sometimes even a very effective visual language can look a little bit tiresome if you use it all over the place. It's kind of like in writing. If you use the same word over and over again, even though that could be a nice word and it's not wrong to use that word, it can still look a little bit repetitive and it's not as interesting. And that is definitely something I'm still learning and I'm still trying to be better at. There's so many times when I'm doing a painting and it looks really good at one point, but because I added too many of something, maybe detail, maybe dark, and it doesn't look as good as it could be. And that's one of the regrets I usually have when I'm doing a painting, that I end up not really liking it. And now the painting is dry, I start to paint some smaller heart shapes. And those can be very useful because of the rock on the dry land are much more clear. So that can make a difference between the land and underneath the water. So again, just a couple of dark to really create the structure of the rock. And now I paint some reflections of the shallow water surface. So with that layering effect, we can tell what is underneath the water and what is the dry land. And here I removed the masking fluid and you can see how clean that white is. And also give a really subtle glaze on the rooftop and the background house. And a few touch up in details, then we're finished. I hope you like this repaint of the scenery, and compared to my last attempt, I definitely like the background trees a lot better. They look lighter, they look fresher, it doesn't look as heavy, and actually feels a little bit more atmospheric that way. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are. We're shifting from summer to autumn, and I hope you enjoy the change of season, and I can't wait to start painting some autumn sceneries. I'm Eric from Cafe Watercolor. I will see you guys next time.